Hey, yo, East Coast hip-hop media, I need to holler at y'all. First of all, shout out to the East Coast rappers. Shout out to East Coast hip-hop fans, because we in a great space as far as the relationship between hip-hop on the West Coast and hip-hop on the East Coast. But as far as the East Coast hip-hop media, is way too much bias going on. Way too much bias. And I think this Kendrick Lamar and Drake shit kind of exposed some of you East Coast platforms' biases too. But I'm going to keep my eye on that. But let me lead with positivity first before I get into my gripe. All right, so look, rewind back to immediately after Tupac and Biggie passed away. Shout out to both legends, RIP to both legends, right? The tone from the East Coast and the West Coast, as far as the major figures in both regions, was all feeling like, man, we need to turn this shit around. You know what I'm saying? So, like Crook, he did a song with Ja Rule on Ja Rule's album. Ja Rule did a song on what would have been Crook's debut Death Row album, right? Fucking Crook did a song with Dyline from Making a Band. So that's, you know, that's already trying to squash the bad boy Death Row beef. Crook did a song with Ashanti on the Baby remix, right? The Game being a part of G Unit, that helped relations a lot between the East and the West. You know what I'm saying? And then a little later, so Kendrick and TDE, they had a cool relationship with ASAP Mob. You know what I'm saying? ASAP Mob had a cool relationship with Odd Future. You know what I'm saying? So this generation and a generation right before this did a good job at making the relationship between the East Coast and West Coast a different thing. Niggas is clicked up, niggas did features with each other. All that shit is cool, and that carried over into right now. The rappers on the East and the rappers on the West fuck with each other, and then fan bases on both coasts fuck with each other too. I'll give you an example. So every time we do analytics when it comes to ShoeGang on streaming platforms, one of the top regions that fuck with us is always East Coast. Jersey, New York, always top 4, top 5, right? Same with when we do our social media platforms where we see where our heaviest following is. It's always East Coast in the top 5. It'd be Cali first and then East Coast right after that, right? So we know fans on the East Coast fuck with West Coast. And the other way around, any kind of barbershop kind of conversation I have, you'll be surprised at how much West Coast fans fuck with East Coast rappers and East Coast everything, right? So all of that is lovely. Here's where my gripe comes into play. So East Coast hip hop media, a lot of time they're way too dismissive of West Coast artists and things related to the West Coast. They're like fucking, it's a lot of bias going on. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, you know, there's a lack of coverage when it comes to West Coast artists, West Coast rappers, you know what I'm saying? There's a lack of coverage when it comes to the East Coast hip hop media platforms. Now, there's a lot of East Coast platforms that I need to shout out. So PSA Hip Hop, Watson, and the homie 3letterman, they dope. Across the board, they show love to all regions, right? Wayno, that used to be on Everyday Struggle. He had Hear Me Out Wayno pod. He's dope. Nigga give love, all that. Rory and Maul, they do a good job of showing love across the board. I feel like Drink Champs do a cool job, especially DJ EFN. He was on the Cube side of the argument when they was like Cube or Biggie when it comes to who's the best storyteller or whatever. That nigga was standing on business, was saying Cube, right? And that was his, you know, that's how he felt. Now, I know he's from New York, Miami. Well, I think he even got family on the West Coast. You know what I mean? So shout out to them. Nadeska does a good job. It's a couple people. Now, Sway and Ebro are from the West Coast. They from the Bay. Even though their platforms are based on the East Coast, they stand on super business, especially Sway. Sway, nigga, show love to everybody, especially West Coast. Like, you can't tell Sway shit about, nigga, West Coast shit. You know what I mean? Sway stands on business 10 toes down. Always showed us love, Crook love. Nigga, he shout out the Bay on a regular basis, right? Everybody else, I don't want to say everybody. Most other platforms, it's shaky. Now, I'm not naive. I understand that the region you grew up in, the city you grew up in, is going to have more of an impact on your life and your opinions, and you're going to be more enthused to talk about this shit if you got a platform and you from that region, right? So I get that. I'm just saying make it a little more balanced. You know what I mean? If you're on the East Coast and you got a platform and you got a segment where you're talking about MOP for 30 minutes, you know what I mean? Talk about fucking Compton Most Wanted for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? 8 and Chill. You know what I mean? If you got a motherfucking an appreciation moment for Mobb Deep, have an appreciation moment for Dog Pound. You know what I'm saying? First of all, Dog Pound is about to drop an album. Shout out to Snoop, Daz, and Corrupt. Cause I'm gonna be watching you motherfuckers to see how much coverage y'all give on this shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm watching you niggas. I just feel like a lot of East Coast platforms are real dismissive. They'll be like, oh, shout out to such and such on the West Coast. It'll be like, well, that nigga's from Oakland. Oh, shout out to such and such. Oh, the West Coast. Nigga, that nigga's from Compton. You know what I mean? Like, LA and the Bay is two different worlds. They need equal attention and different type of fucking attention and specific attention. You know what I mean? We don't just lump in everybody on the East Coast. Oh, that nigga just from the East Coast. We'll be like, oh, such and such from Queens, such and such from Yonkers. We pay more attention on the West Coast. I feel like West Coast hip hop platforms do a little better job as far as spreading the love around across the board. You know what I mean? When it comes to guests, when it comes to topics, spreading it around across regions. Shout out to Crook's Corner. Shout out to DJ Head, Chuck Dizzle, Homegrown Radio. Shout out to Bootleg Kev. Shout out to Big Boy's Neighborhood. Shout out to Madman and UNG Radio Station. Shout out to us. You know what I mean? Doc J, Debo, Madman. We do a show, Judge's Table. You know what I mean? It's a couple other platforms on this end that I feel like, we just do a little better job. If you listen to Glasses Malone talk about hip hop, he gonna talk about all hip hop. He not just gonna be only on some bias from the West Coast perspective. You know what I'm saying? Man, I be tapped in with a lot of East Coast hip hop media platforms because I'm a fan of the shows. I'm a fan of the artists. I'm a fan of the media personalities and shit, right? And it just be like, dog, it be like, if it ain't some super, super high level West Coast artist, it's not going to get a lot of coverage. Or if it ain't like something tragic, they'll be like, oh man, RIP to Coolio. And then they'll move on. They won't speak of Coolio's impact or none of that. Or they'll be like, oh man, RIP to Shock G. And that's it. It's like, nigga, at least take an opportunity to educate people on who Shock G is. RIP to Shock G, RIP to Coolio, and every other, legend we lost on all regions. I'm just saying, it just be way too motherfucking dismissive. We got a wealth of hip hop shit on the West Coast. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could talk about, nigga, the Good Life Cafe and the open mics. You could talk about fucking Project Blow. There's so many names and group names that I never hear when I'm watching East Coast hip hop platforms. You know what I'm saying? You could talk about fucking nigga Odd Future more. Talk about nigga Hieroglyphics. Talk about Paris and from the Bay and all the militant shit he was on. Man, South Central Cartel, Cypress Hill, House of Pain. You could talk about Above the Law and how influential they was on like G-Funk. Talk more about Warren G, more about everything, man. I'm just saying, it's a whole lot of shit that should be, weaved in a little bit when it comes to hip-hop media platforms on the East Coast. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Crook and Joel, because them forming a duo helps a lot. You know what I'm saying? But East Coast media platforms ain't talking about them as much as they should. Nigga, that hard EP they dropped, Rise and Fall, motherfucking JFK LAX, motherfucking Prosper, nigga, motherfucking Harbor City is a classic. Nigga, supreme lyricism, supreme storytelling at the highest level, and you motherfuckers do not be reporting on certain things. You know what I'm saying? We watching. So I'm gonna keep watching you motherfuckers. Let me know if y'all agree, man. Y'all know what it is. ShoeGang, Doc J.